Welcome back. Today, we're going to be painting some fairy mushrooms I spotted after a rain in a nearby regional park in the East Bay. While I'm painting, I'm going to answer some questions that I got from y'all on my last video about my experience with galleries and teaching. Follow along and body double with me. If you like the format of this video, you can boop the subscribe button to find out when more of them happen. If it's your first time here, I'm Mel, and I'm an artist in the Bay Area who makes work about homes and the adventures that I go on outdoors. Here, I document my process of being an artist, the struggles and successes, and the ways that I attempt to achieve persistent bloom. For this painting, I am working on a watercolor block, meaning the edges are all sealed and glued, and I am using a set of artist's gouache that I was able to develop using the database on the Fearless Brush website. I'm going to link that below, as well as my palette, and I'll be sharing sporadic bits about the painting throughout, but most of this is going to be about what it's been like to work with art galleries, and why I love artist-run spaces. I actually used to run 2 of them. I ran this place called Subterranean Gallery after I interned there in Kansas City, and it was a gallery in my basement apartment in Midtown. I also was able to help out with a gallery known as Plug Projects that was run by a collective of artists, and that was a really, really awesome experience that I'll talk about a little bit more as well. If you end up having questions about this painting in particular, you can go ahead and leave those in the comments, and I'm happy to share more about what it is I'm doing and when. If you have a question, feel free to leave the timestamp at which I'm doing something, and I'm happy to answer your painting questions if you have them as well. So, let's dive in. The Rupert McGee asked, "You mentioned having been involved in galleries. I was wondering what the process is like. I have done some art majoring, but never reached the gallery stuff, and I'm a bit lost on how that process of applying works and the whole system." Thanks for this great question. I went to art school at the Kansas City Art Institute and I studied painting. My undergrad centered around oil painting and life drawing, so I am not self-taught as an artist, but boy howdy am I self-taught in business. Art school was an interesting potion. 1 part technical training, 1 part theory, 1 part critique and community building, and it was all wrapped up in the idea that you should work toward exhibiting your work in galleries, getting an MFA, and filling your artist resume, aka a CV, with opportunities. I'm a very type A person and an overachiever, so I followed all of those recommended steps. And I will say that the first 2 gallery types I'm going to mention will likely discourage you, but I do have chapters in the description below, and artist-run galleries are my absolute favorite. So I mentioned in my self-compassion and sketchbooking video that I didn't really feel comfortable in galleries, and what I mean by that are big museums and what are known as blue chip galleries. These are the top tier galleries that you'll see in places like LA, New York, Miami, etc., and they will be incredibly prestigious. That is their draw for people. That prestige often leads to higher paying clientele, they will often represent artists for many years, they keep some work on hand, and they'll usually participate in big art fairs like Art Basel. Okay, I'm making these spaces sound really good, but they are not for me at all. The ties to wealth often leads to writing about exhibitions in what they call international art English, meaning that it's really, really hard to decipher and it doesn't necessarily make sense to most people, and they love to gatekeep. These are the kinds of galleries you get into if you have rich friends, you want to prove yourself for your CV in higher education, to get a full-time position, or you work really hard for a lot of years to make super rad, large-scale work, and those galleries see value in your work for clients. This last one is kind of a unicorn, but I have seen it done, and usually you need to work with galleries lower on the prestige ladder first. Below those blue chip and prestigious spaces, we have mid-tier galleries. Now, mid-tier galleries are usually pretty good, but they are run as for-profit businesses, and it's crucial to keep that in mind. Oftentimes, these spaces can be run underneath a larger company like a real estate business, and because of that, these galleries have really solid client lists. They share those lists between their different businesses, and they produce shows that look as good or better than those blue chip galleries, but they are more accessible to artists. These spaces are often not really supportive to artists just getting into exhibiting their work and showing on the scene. They typically want to see a solid resume of exhibitions that you've been in and a really solid body of work. And they're also going to gatekeep, as they are working to sell art as a luxury good. Think of how you feel walking into the designer shoe section at a luxury department store like Nordstrom. That is the vibe these galleries give off. Only a lot of times I've gone into them and they haven't really engaged with me like they're excited to sell things, which has led me to feel let down as someone who used to work in commission sales. I think a lot of these types of galleries can be good, but there are some snakes out there to watch out for. If you are paying high fees to apply for their shows, that is a red flag, because they are banking on those application fees to support their bottom line. They're likely not going to give out very many exhibition spaces. I have also heard of galleries at this scale charging rent to artists, so being able to rent a space on the gallery walls and they want to take a commission. I would avoid anything like this at all costs. When you are ready to work with galleries like this, you need to not be afraid to ask questions, which can be tricky when you're just starting out. Ask questions like, do you have a client list that you know is already interested in this work? How many pieces do you think will sell from this show? Because it's important to keep in mind the cost to produce your work and framework for a show at that scale is extremely expensive. If a gallery wants a 50% cut of your work, they better have a client list to show for it. You're a business, they are also a business. Go into the transaction knowing for a fact that they will get you a specific number of sales or a specific number of new clients you can add to your list through their quote-unquote exposure. If it's an established gallery that you're working with and they can't answer those questions, don't walk away from that opportunity. You need to run. These are the types of experiences that will frustrate you, burn you out, and light your money on fire. If you don't care about sales because you're trying to build up prestige and you want a really rad CV, I see you, and that's what I wanted to do. It's what I was taught to do in art school. But this is where you'll want to work with artist-run and small DIY alternative spaces, and you'll have way more fun. Okay. It's painting intermission time, and I have to show you the phone book. I'm going to read you this excerpt from the introduction. Why it matters. There is no resource like this. Artists and arts people who are producing underground events and experiential culture are highly localized and can be insular, either in their geographic location or in their social networks. This research, culled from practitioners around the country, articulates a broader movement of artists organizing on the DIY and community level so they can see themselves in relationship to each other, share strategies, and build audience. The central core value to the phone book is that artists and arts organizations provide value to the communities in which they operate. We seek to highlight this work at the micro level and create threads of understanding across these different situations and contexts. Alright, so I'm going to flip through this resource. Feel free to pause and look up any of the galleries that you see here. Unfortunately, this was published in 2015, so it's almost 10 years old, but this was so important for me to find back in 2012. I got to see the third edition of the phone book, and I suddenly had a completely different idea for what a gallery could be. It changed everything I thought I knew about positioning myself in the art world. I learned about it from the director of the Charlotte Street Foundation at the time, one of Kansas City's biggest arts nonprofits, and the phone book really showed me a completely different art world than the one I was being taught about in art school. These were spaces independent from the traditional gallery scene that put the needs of artists front and center. I was incredibly excited to discover spaces like this because suddenly I found the places that I could belong. So I'm about to get to Missouri here, and this, just flipping through it, made my heart feel so full. I loved these spaces. These were the places that I would always go to. They were the places that made me fall in love with my local art scene. The Charlotte Street Foundation that I mentioned, the drugstores where I used to have my studio, a couple of my good friends ran Front Space and 50/50. Grand Arts was amazing and cool. Hound's Den existed in someone's house. Oh hey, there I am, Subterranean Gallery. And the Kansas City Artists Coalition that I mentioned in my last video. A lot of these spaces have evolved or no longer exist, but I love them, and they will always have a special place in my heart. I'm gonna keep flipping through here, but as you can see, they really range. So Depending on the state you're in or the city you're in, you might have more or less of these types of spaces. But sometimes it was just as easy as throwing white paint on the walls, hanging up your friend's work in your home, and inviting people over for a party, and throwing a press release at the local free newspaper. Artist-run spaces gave me hope that there was a place for my work in the world, and while I didn't necessarily find running them to be something that I could sustain, because a lot of it was volunteer labor and me paying for the exhibitions to happen out of my shoe salesperson salary, hence that analogy earlier. But what I recognized in these spaces was that if you want to see something, you can build it. I'm going to show you another section in here that's a resource about should I accept this opportunity, and I think these questions might be helpful for you as well. These are the standard questions for artists given an opportunity. Do I believe in what this institution stands for? Is this the ideal venue for my project or my work? Does my work feel alive in this context? Does this project require funding? Am I willing to ask my friends and family to fund it? Is there a version of it I can propose if funding is not available? Am I comfortable volunteering my time and energy? Is exposure compensation enough? Does this opportunity help me meet or get to know people I may want to work with in the future? Will it enable conversation with people I want to be in conversation with? Is this opportunity helping me reach the audience I want to reach? What are all of the benefits of working with this institution? Am I providing a service? And if so, how do I expect to be compensated? Do I have time to do this well? Will my opportunity help sustain myself financially? Do I need it to? Am I clear what kind of support I'm being offered? Have I asked for what I need, even if it's not been offered? Who benefits from my labor? This one is huge. Is there enough freedom in this opportunity? Would saying no to this opportunity be saying yes to something else I care about more? Is this the best art world for my work? Is it the most effective use of my time, money, and energy? Am I willing to go into debt for this opportunity? Have I already amassed too much debt? Am I being instrumentalized? Am I okay with that? Am I happier making my living separate from making my art? So yeah, keep this list on hand, and I'll quickly explain instrumentalized. It is a concept where an organization might be using you for hitting particular metrics that you're not necessarily okay with. Last on our little book tour is the plug book. So I was a co-director and curator of this space along with 5 other artists during the years of 2016 to 2017 while I was kind of figuring out whether or not I wanted to go to graduate school and if I wanted to take curatorial practice as a serious thing. Plug Projects was so awesome because it was built by artists for artists. It typically showed more experimental work. So it'd be things that might not sell at a typical gallery, and they would also do really rad things like this art book initiative and art book fair that they did. They also put these little publications all around the town, and I loved going to Plug and writing about the shows that were happening there. I thought they shared really, really cool work, and I highly recommend checking them out. I will put a link to Plug Gallery down below. They've done several iterations of rebranding since this particular publication came out. In general, I think that Plug is the epitome of a really beautifully designed and really well-run artist-run space that I think not only competes with those mid-level galleries, but creates a sense of community that is unmatched. That quality is part of why I burned out, but it also costs a lot of money to run these spaces. So that is a thing to consider if you're working with them. And here's the show that I was in, Translate, back in June of 2016. Okay, so we'll take a little break from talking about galleries for a bit, and I'll talk about this painting. I am absolutely in love with this set of artist's gouache that I got. I cannot believe the way that I can layer color and create so much depth and energy in a painting in the same way that I would with oils. I don't work with oil paint because I have cats and I allow them to exist inside of my studio, but I love oil paint, and this gouache is giving me that ability and freedom to work with opaque layers, really pigmented paints, and achieve some of the similar goals that I was able to achieve with oil paint, only now I can carry it with me anywhere, and I can finish a painting usually in one sitting because of how quickly it dries. So if you've always wanted to try oil paint, I might actually suggest you give real quality artist's gouache a try. It's great if you've tried working with watercolor but have found it frustrating to always leave the white of the paper wherever you want the light to poke through. And it's so much fun. Definitely try working with gouache. If you want to geek out and learn directly from me, I am teaching an opaque watercolor in the garden course on Saturday, April 6th at Bees and Blooms Farm. I've got some info in the description on how you can sign up for that. It'd be a really great drive up from SF or the East Bay if you are in the Bay Area, and we can hang out and I can show you everything that I know and love about gouache together. So check that out if you're interested in this process. Okay, so back to the bit about galleries. So when I found the phone book, I found the 3rd edition, in which Subterranean Gallery was run by the directors/renters Ayla Rexroth and Clayton Skidmore, and the two of them were huge mentors to me in terms of figuring out who I was as an artist and what I wanted to do with my life after art school. And at the time that I was interning, they were hosting an artist lecture series in a hot tub called the Hot Tub Dialogues. It actually won a Kickstarter award for its uniqueness that particular year in 2012. It was super informal, it was wild and outlandish and fun, and suddenly I was finding myself amongst other artists and seeing their perspectives being centered in a space. Artist-run spaces are all about building community, sharing resources, mutual growth, and developing opportunities where there are none. Nonprofits, the ones I tend to like anyway, do similar stuff, only they have greater financial backing. This gives them more ability to help artists financially, but they can occasionally be more limited due to the boards who run them. I took part in an attempt to start a nonprofit on 3 separate occasions, and it was super difficult. You need to be able to access people with a lot of money. Oftentimes, the DIY ethos of an organization does start to hit bumps in the road and roadblocks when you need to tailor your institutional goals to the vision of the board, as they are the ones fundraising and investing their own money into the organization. It gets messy, and that's why museums are messy, but I'll save that discussion for another day. Lastly, I want to keep this answer kind of short, but Zeneca asked, I live in a rural community last year and I was invited to join an art society in a leadership position, and now I'm preparing for the summer with community arts events. Your sip and sketch sounds fantastic. Would you be willing to elaborate on what you did to market that, what sort of event it was, and also classes you are running for your local area? Now, I want to do a whole video on why I started out on the farm, and I have that planned for later this year. I'll answer that I'm new in my community and I don't have an MFA, which means I can't teach through traditional channels like art schools and universities. Partnerships through existing organizations, though, like Bees and Blooms Farm or the Arts and Rec Centers in the East Bay, feel to be the best way to get myself out there, reach new people, and start sharing what I love. I taught in KCAI's continuing education program from the time I graduated there, about until I left Kansas City, and I even taught in their pre-college art lab. I taught at the Nelson Atkins Museum, and I recently left a job at an Apple store where I got to teach art for quite a long time. In all of these past situations, I had someone else doing the marketing for me, and now that I'm on my own in regard to the Sip and Sketch programs, those were a free marketing program. So those allowed me to start meeting some of the community, finding out what their needs were around creative programming, and doing those events did cost me money, but a lot less than running targeted Facebook ads, and meeting people in real life is just so much better. Plus, I was able to collaborate with a local winery who wanted to build some more community too. So if I were building a learning space in a rural community, I would think about what organizations might exist already and tapping into them. Quilters has to be a big one. Getting to know if there are local quilters, fiber artists, knitters, and crafters. They might do a pop-up shop during the holidays at a local church or community center. Asking these people what they need tends to feel better than guessing, and you'll likely fill more of your courses. I'm still in the development phase of Persistent Bloom and the teaching/retreat side of my business. I'm getting better at it, and I'm starting to think more about it like I did artist run spaces. How can I adapt to and serve the needs of my community by sharing my passion, what I love, and giving others something that allows them to be more creative, build relationships, and continue learning? So, that's it. Did you learn something new and cool today? If so, rad. Thanks for watching till the end. Maybe give me the gift of a like, a comment down below, and let me know what you think, or check out some of my links in my caption to see what I'm up to around the internet. All right, until next time, bye!